Closed captioning for Justice and Law Weekly is provided in part by the Clifford Law Offices in support of quality public television for the Chicago area.
I'm Bob Clifford, President of the Chicago Bar Association. Welcome to the Chicago Bar Association's Justice and Law Weekly. I'm pleased to welcome today some very special guests. Judge Thomas L. Hogan of the Circuit Court of Cook County, Judge Sheila M. Murphy, formerly of the Circuit Court of Cook County, and Sandra D. Lewis, Director of Community Affairs for the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. Today we're discussing one of our community's most pernicious and troubling problems, youth violence. All my guests are members of the Chicago Bar Association's Interfaith Committee, which has adopted the very daunting goal of reducing youth violence in our community. So welcome everyone, and thank you for being with us today. Judge Hogan, let me start with you. When I became president of the CBA and became more active, I see this committee, the Interfaith Committee. I'm thinking to myself, what the heck is the Bar Association doing with an Interfaith Committee? You're the chairman. Or actually co-chair, I guess, with Judge Murphy. Could you tell us a little bit about the committee and its work and its history?
The committee's been around for about 20 years, and it formally focused on issues relating to the running of churches and synagogues, and it was comprised mostly of lawyers. About 3 or 4 years ago, a group of us joined the committee after having been in the audience when Archbishop Tutu spoke to the Chicago Bar Association on this subject, that being violence in youth. And he challenged us all to view the people who were the victims of this violence as our own daughters and sons and nieces and nephews. And it caused the number of us who were there that night to focus our efforts on trying to do what we could to reduce the amount of violence on youth in our community. So that's what our effort has been for the last 3 or 4 years.
Judge Murphy, were you at that meeting with Archbishop Tutu?
I was. In fact, I invited him, and the commitment we had to make to have him come was that it would not be just he coming to Chicago to make a speech to lawyers in the Chicago Bar Association, but he had me commit that we would try to move forward peace in the community of Chicago, all the communities, and to take away the terrible violence.
So tell us a little bit. I mean, it's obviously a laudatory goal, but on a practical basis, how does the committee do the work that you think accomplishes this mission?
Well, we're actually working with young people. We've had several town hall meetings right here at WYCC, and it actually probably the best work the committee has done is hearing from the youth, from the children, from the young people themselves. I think that's been our greatest learning curve.
Yeah. Sandra, you're with the State's Attorney's Office, prosecutors. You're out there supposed to be prosecuting crime. Sounds like you're trying to prevent it.
Absolutely,
Tell
Bob.
us about that.
And I think that's one of the misconceptions that the community has. It is the job and the responsibility of the prosecutor's office to prosecute those crimes, but more so to offer the alternatives to the young people that are getting involved. It should not be a revolving door that we're starting out with 13, 14, 15-year-olds entering into the juvenile justice system and then turning around as an adult into the adult system. So if we can offer those alternatives and give them some new pathways to go down, it's important.
Were you present when the Archbishop was here?
I was present, not at the meeting, but I had the pleasure of meeting him at the luncheon.
Yeah, right.
And I mean, his vision alone.
Yeah, force of nature. Man's a force of nature.
Absolutely. You know, how he visions young people, it was definitely an honor to be in his presence.
Sure, sure.
And to hear from him.
So tell us, what does the state's attorney empower you to do on behalf of the office and on behalf of the community to accomplish the goals?
It's to outreach to every young person whether they're in Chicago public schools or private schools. It's our responsibility to let them know what their options are and to make them aware of what the law is.
And how do you do that? I mean, tell me, you know, when you leave here and we're done talking about this program, how are you going to go implement that?
Well, we implement it using those community-based partners. Everyone who is at the table, a stakeholder, whether it's a pastor, whether it's a teacher, whether it's someone in law, you know, we're talking and making that connection. We're bridging those gaps. And I think it's important that they understand how our office works and then what alternatives that there are. So it's our responsibility to make sure that we are in constant conversation, making people aware.
Right. You know, Judge Hogan, our viewers wouldn't readily know this, but and at the risk of being patronizing to you, you're regarded as one of the shining stars in the circuit court and in the law division. You handle some of the most complicated and serious of the jury trials that go on in the Daly Center. And so you really amaze a lot of people that you're engaged in this. This is like, for lack of a better term, a do-good activity on your part. I mean, there's something about this that's inspired you and has captured your attention. Could you tell us what it is and why you're giving it such time and effort?
Well, I think it's our obligation as people who've been given as much as I've been given to give back. And when Archbishop Tutu used those words that he did during his presentation to the Bar Association, it just caused me to look at this in a much more personal way. Because if you put your own relatives, child, niece, nephew's face on the people who are being affected by violence, it becomes for me, it became a much more personal response, and so that's what's really motivated me in the efforts that I've expended over the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. Judge Murphy, what's the hook that captured your attention to this enterprise, this effort?
Well, I was a criminal defense attorney, a public defender, a federal defender, and a judge. And I was also at a wonderful law firm, Rothschild, Berry & Meyer. But as the years went by, it just seems to me that I should give back in a very direct way, because I know a lot of what's wrong and what we could do better, because I've seen it from the bottom up and from the top down. And so I'm teaching now at John Marshall Law School a course in restorative justice. And we start out talking about South Africa. We start out with a film where Archbishop Tutu says what we need is restorative justice. So that's what that's what I'm working on.
Could you give us, you know, we take for granted that, you know, we as lawyers talk about these things, and you just use this term restorative justice. Could you explain to our viewers what that means? What is it?
Well, Judge Hogan just explained, repeated the words of Desmond Tutu, and he said, "U antu." Every person is a human being. Every person should be looked at like our grandchild, our child. And so, if you do that in a court system, if you do that as in the state's attorney, if you do that with the police, then you're not arresting everyone. You're trying to find out what caused this act. Where did things go wrong? And we find that in Richard's Career Academy that we find these kids that only were 5% are graduating. We find they come from dismal homes where there's no washer, there's no dryer, there's no running water, and they're made fun of because they smell. And this is in the city of Chicago, in Englewood. And so we have law students going out there, mentoring them, trying to find ways to help them, doing peace circles inside the school so that afterwards they won't be killing each other outside. And the state's attorney program is Kathy Bankhead taught us how to do this. She actually came to the Chicago Bar and did a peace circle with us. And we've had other demonstrations, and they're absolutely beautiful. And it really changes how the whole atmosphere is. And it goes from one of revenge, I'm going to get you, and anger with the teachers, anger with the judges, feeling nobody's listening to me. I'm sitting here, it's a revolving door. Instead of that, you've got peace, you've got hope, you've got people going into programs, parents going for treatment, for alcohol, for drugs, for mental health issues, so that they can be parents. We have so many now who are unable to. They are self-medicating.
And what do you tell us a little bit about your curriculum for your class? So you're teaching law students about this subject, and what can the community expect from these lawyers in their work in the community upon graduation?
Upon graduation, we expect that they will never be the same. That they will always do the type of things that Judge Hogan and I are doing right now, and helping people, whether they become judges, whether they become lawyers. We expect that they're going to do pro bono work, and this is our profession has a depth in doing work for the poor. Justice John Paul Stevens spent time with his partners. That was my old law firm, going to the penitentiary, doing post-conviction. We don't have we have public defenders doing that. We need everybody doing that. We need private lawyers. Private lawyers bring so much. And at the law school, who we have speaking is people like Scott Turow, people like Mark Tremolin, a partner at Mayer Brown and Platt, who show, Andy Lofthouse, who show how you can be a good lawyer and a great human being and move it forward, move peace forward.
It's a better connection.
How do you, but let me, okay, I'll be the devil's advocate with you for a moment, if I may. There's so many people out there, particularly in these charged political times, that say, hey, forget devoting resources to this. Just put these kids in jail, lock them up. We need strong laws. We need law enforcement. We can't be soft on crime. There's seemingly a conflict there. What do you say to that?
Well, I would think that the people who are saying that aren't really being fair with those of us who are the taxpayers, because it costs more to hold someone in jail for life than it does to work with them before they get to the stage that they commit the kind of crimes that force them to be put into jail for life. We've never given restorative justice concepts an opportunity to succeed. If we do that, it seems to me that the amount of money that we spend on prisons will go down drastically. Now, I don't have any empirical studies that show that, but the reason I don't is because we haven't tried it. And I say this based on what I've learned over the course of the last 3 years in my work on this committee. When we started, there were a group of us. We expanded the membership to include people from the Chicago Police Department, Chicago Board of Education, and the State Attorney's Office. Yes. Sandy's been with us since the beginning. Kathy Bankhead's already been mentioned. She's been with us from the beginning. Colleen Sheehan, who was a judge at juvenile court, was with us. So we've had resources upon which we could draw to learn about this problem and these series of problems, I should say. And what we've all learned over the course of the last 2 years, and that was one of the first things we did, was to learn what it was we could do, because it is such a daunting problem. We learned that the kind of concepts that we want to introduce into the community are concepts that used to be taught by families and no longer are.
Where does the quote-unquote interfaith part of this, what role do you find the ministries having in what you're trying to do?
Well, I think they play an exceptionally large role, because the ministers have also been part of our effort.
Right.
We have ministers on our committee. Sandy, that's her job, so I'll let her talk more about that.
And I would say this, Bob, just to add what Judge Hogan was going to say, is that they are sometimes seen as the front line of defense, if I can use that term loosely. Many times within a community or a parish, their congregants come to them for an array of issues and problems, and it is their listening ear that they're taking all of this in. So it's important that they understand where the resources are as well. If we do not equip them with the resources from the state's attorney's office, definitely what the judges bring to the table, they would not know how to gear that parent or that congregant with that at-risk youth of the resources that are available to them. So it's very important that they understand what role they play in this as well.
Right. We've mentioned at the beginning of the program that a lot of this work was talked about at a town hall meeting here at WYCC that then President of the Bar, now State's Attorney Anita Alvarez chaired. There were some specific bullet point ideas that came out of that town hall meeting. Could you tell us a bit about those and how
I think the
we're trying to implement them?
Important thing that came out of that is that what Judge Murphy said. We had attended numerous meetings around the city and the county on how this youth violence was playing out. And in each and every meeting, the missing factor was the young people. And when they were invited to tell their side of the story of how it is affecting them, I think things kind of changed because we heard it from them first. They were excluded from the conversation so many times, and I've heard young people come to me and say, how can you solve our problem if we're not in the room and you're not listening to us? So that was a key factor in that town hall meeting, that they were actually involved and participating and making an awareness to what the issues and concerns they have, and that the adults are listening. So we became, as an attorney, as a prosecutorial office, we became better listeners to the young people's issues of what was actually going on with them.
Judge, does the committee go out into the community now? Are you visiting classrooms? Are you meeting with students? Are you having this dialogue, and how are you listening?
The answer to the first part of the question is yes, and I guess you'd have to ask the students to see how we're listening. I think we're doing a great job, but of course I'm prejudiced about that. The first part of our goal was to highlight the issue. So we spent a very long time planning and producing the town hall meeting, and from after that, we spent another very long time trying to come up with programs, develop and produce programs which might start to introduce concepts of restorative justice. And we did that by meeting with students and ministers and teachers and administrators who would ever talk to us. We hosted a number of events for ministers at churches throughout the city, and Sandy was instrumental in allowing us to do that. And we still would extend an open invitation to any minister who happens to listen to this or watch this to join us, because this is a multi-faceted effort on our parts, or on our part, I should say. We have, through the efforts that we've made at outreach, we have been able to, through the services of WYCC and the Chicago Bar Association, highlight various programs throughout the metropolitan area that work with on the issue of youth violence. And so we've put together, I think, 3 or 4 half-an-hour TV shows that highlight the efforts of these programs, and our goal was to put on a positive spin on what it was that was being done. And then this year, we decided to put on our own program. So we just finished up with our pilot demonstration restorative justice project at Washington McKinley Junior School in Chicago Heights. And we put together, we worked with about 30 or 40 13 and 14-year-olds, and we gave them a fact pattern, and then they were in charge of resolving the issues related to the fact pattern. And they used, one group used a peace circle, one group used a peer jury, and one group used a trial. And we are going to replicate this program, and that's our goal, replicate this program in the early part of 2012 at the LaSalle 2 Magnet School on the near northwest side of Chicago. And our goal is to keep on doing that for as long as we have funds to do that.
Yeah. How, you know, I'm sure the viewers that just heard your description would say, you know, very interesting stuff. How can I help? How can
I'll
the
tell you
community
how
help?
it can help.
Sure.
First of all, we need some kind of grant money to go forward, because what we're doing now is great. I talked about Richards High School that we're in in John Marshall, and this wonderful program that we did. And when the program was finished, Tom turned to me and he said, "We are at the start of something great." And he's absolutely right. Restorative justice is great, but we're going to have funds to go forward. Why are we just in one school in Chicago? Why just one in the suburbs? What could we do? And yesterday I read in the Wall Street Journal an editorial comment by Rahm Emanuel, our mayor, about what he envisions for the city colleges. The business would help. Well, if we could have the same effort under your leadership of Bar Association with bar members, lawyers going out to these different schools, just imagine how this could be expanded. And so I think you should go to Washington and get the money to do this.
You mentioned that to me at the beginning of our get-together today, that I should go to Washington and speak to Senator Durbin about it, and I said that I would. So we can certainly do that. But once we get this grant money, how do we then expand it into other schools? Do we have to have a partnership with CPS, Chicago Public School System?
Well, we don't want to limit it. We do need to work with CPS, but we don't want to limit it with CPS. Our goal is to replicate this program in schools and churches throughout the service area of the CBA, and that extends to 6 or 7 counties in northwestern or northeastern Illinois. So that is our goal. And it's not that we want to turn our backs on CPS, but we don't want to just do it with Chicago Public Schools. Because the problem is everywhere.
Sure, and you can't bite off more than you can chew, for
Right,
lack of a better.
right.
Tell us a little bit more. I'm sure the people heard about, you know, the Peace Circle and the mock trial, and tell us more about that, Judge. How did that work?
Well, the Peace Circle is
What is the Peace Circle? I don't even know what that is.
Well, it goes back to, again, Archbishop Tutu saying, when you're doing this, remember what we said in South Africa when we were doing it. Mm-hmm. Nothing about us without us. So,
nothing about us without us.
And so you put the students into a Peace Circle. Mm-hmm. And they start out, so many of the students have been so psychologically damaged because of the trauma, and isn't that right?
Absolutely, or even isolated. And it gives them a level of comfort. It's a comfort zone.
That's right.
You know, where you bring nothing but peace in.
Right.
And, you know, the kids, I think, have a fantastic time with it, because you will get some who have been withdrawn, and this Peace Circle allows them to have a voice.
That's right, and it allows the people who are also in the Peace Circle to understand why they are the way they are. So you start out by in the Peace Circle, and you say, tell us about one person who has who's had a good
and what kind of stories are you hearing?
We hear good things about.
Well, tell us some.
Well, one girl said that she told how they had these wonderful things that happened when her grandmother was alive. Mm-hmm. But then she talked about what was happening right now. Mm-hmm. And this is a girl who was ready to be expelled before the Peace Circle. And she talked about that they didn't have enough money to live in a place by themselves, so they lived with other people in the Inglewood area.
Okay.
And she didn't know who was going to hurt her at night, which man was going to obviously rape her at night. Well, of course, why wouldn't she be acting out in school? And so then once that comes out, then we can get resources. Now, but that's what I'm saying.
So when the State's Attorney's Office hears a story like that, what do you do about it?
Well, I think it's our responsibility, Bob, to offer those resources in which I talked about earlier. We have a victim witness unit with the office that helps to grieve with those families that have been affected by violence. And just to piggyback on what Judge Murphy had said, there was one young lady also involved in a peace circle that had lost her brother to gun violence. And through her storytelling in this peace circle, she learned to deal with that loss. And then she also learned how to cope with the violence around her and what she needed to do. So it's very important, I think, with the State's Attorney's Office that we continue in those resource efforts.
What kind of tools are you trying to give and empower these children to have to help them through their days?
Well, we call it restorative rap.
Okay.
You know, that's what we call it because they call it that.
Okay.
You know, once they are in the circles, then they want to do the circles themselves. And then they talk to each other in restorative rap. And so if they're talking about somebody else, like trying to bully, then they'll say, wait a minute, you know, what are you talking like that for? Don't you know we should be doing restorative rap? Now, how can we do this?
Exactly.
How could we do this if we were all in a circle? Now let's do a circle right here, and there'll be like 2 or 3 of them out in the hallway at the criminal court. It's so moving because there are signs on each door that says "No children admitted." You know, and here in this place in the criminal court of Cook County, they're doing what they call restorative rap. It's quite remarkable.
There you go. Well, there's not enough time for us to. We're going to have to do another segment on this because I think the community would like to hear more about what you're doing.
And there's a lot more.
My hat's off to all of you for the time and personal effort that you're taking. It's really very special. If there's one thing you wanted to say to the millions of people that eventually will watch this show, what would it be? I
would say we could save money and save children by looking at it through the eyes, as our committee members have said, of New Testament, not Old Testament.
Okay.
Not that there's anything wrong with the Old Testament.
That's right. He keeps me straight, as you can see.
I'm going to give you the last word, Cindy.
Bob, I would hope that any parent that is watching is that you take the time out and listen to your child.
There you go. Well, folks, this has been a very interesting discussion, but certainly one talking about youth violence in Chicago that is critical to us all. So Judge Tom Hogan, Judge Sheila Murphy, and Sandra Lewis, all of the Chicago Bar Association's Interfaith Committee, thank you so very much. We hope you've enjoyed learning more about the work of this unique committee with Chicago area youth and the people in our community that are working so hard to make it better. Until next time, I'm Bob Clifford. Thanks for joining us in the Chicago Bar Association's Justice and Law Weekly.
Closed captioning for Justice and Law Weekly is provided in part by the Clifford Law Offices in support of quality public television for the Chicago area.